Today, we are going to build a modern iMac, but not one of those iMacs. No, I'm talking about one of these bad boys. And that thing's heavy. We are going to tear into this transparent plastic all-in-one, give it some fresh tech for 2025, and save a bunch of money by avoiding the Apple tax. If you grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, chances are you are very familiar with the iMac G3. These things were everywhere, in schools, businesses, homes, and there's a good chance that one of these may very well have been your very first computer ever. Heck, I'm not even an Apple guy, and I still have a lot of love for these things because they were in my schools growing up, and also all of my friends had them. But using one in 2025 is a bit of a rough experience. It's painfully slow, the CRT screen is a little hard on the eyes, and sound quality definitely leaves something to be desired. So what do you say we tear into this weird egg-shaped computer and do something about all of those issues? Disassembling the iMac made me realize just how weird and quirky these computers truly were. As I was opening up the various hatches and searching for hidden screws, I started catching glimpses of this pressed form RF shielding, and then when I finally revealed the whole thing, I realized that you'd probably never see anything like this in a modern computer. Obviously it's functional, but it's also just built to look really cool. And then I saw the speakers. Wow, look how cool these speakers are. Too bad these ones in particular sound like an aluminum can full of rocks. Oh, that's so cool. I really do appreciate the design of these computers. Tearing further into the machine revealed some more recognizable parts. I stripped away the disk drive, the hard drive, and the main motherboard itself. All of these components are going to get fully modernized replacements, and like I said a second ago, the speakers were completely shot, so as cool as they look, I had to say goodbye to them as well. Oh. But don't worry, I've got a fun upgrade plan there as well. Unfortunately, time has not been kind to some of the plastics inside the iMac, and as I was attempting to remove this screen bezel, well, it practically disintegrated in my hand. At first, I was kind of worried about losing such a big part of the computer, but as you'll see later, this actually kind of worked to our advantage. Now, this next part of the disassembly is where things start to get dangerous. The iMac screen is a CRT, and CRTs can store a lethal amount of energy. Even if the screen has been off for months, it's always a good idea to make sure it's fully discharged. So to do that, I connected a screwdriver to a ground point with a set of alligator clips, and then touched the screwdriver to the screen's anode, which is hidden under this insulating rubber cap. And even then, a CRT is still really dangerous. The entire thing is basically one big vacuum tube, so the risk of implosion is always present. Keeping that in mind, I carefully disassembled the rest of the screen and laid it all out on my bench. All right, well, Apple is nothing if not extremely consistent because even their old computers are a complete pain in the ass to tear down. But now I want to turn our attention to the part of this computer that we're actually going to keep, which is the old case. By removing all of those internal components, especially that CRT tube, we've definitely freed up a lot of room inside the case for, well, activities. But now we have a bit of a problem. A lot of the stuff that we removed is actually integral to the structure of the computer. And without it, the case is just kind of loosely held together with a few clips. So our first job is going to be beefing up the case with a bunch of new parts. However, before I could start making those new parts, I wanted to do something that was going to make this whole process a million times easier. I wanted to 3D scan every part of the iMac that we're going to be keeping. When you're trying to make new parts for an old case, having an accurate digital replica removes like 90% of the guesswork and makes your life so much easier. And that's doubly true when you're dealing with a design like the iMac's, where it's all curves and basically no flat surfaces. So after I had my 3D scans loaded up into Fusion 360, I spent a bit of time studying the iMac's case. And here I realized that this might actually be easier than I initially thought. The first thing I modeled was a set of posts that will connect the top and bottom halves of the case with just 4 screws. After I hit print on those, I turned my attention to the iMac's power supply, because here I wanted to cut costs and also keep everything looking original. Obviously, we're still going to need a way to power this thing, and I thought it'd be really cool if we could just reuse the original power cord. Long story short, after burning through a ton of solder wick, I eventually got the iMac's original power connector to wiggle free. But to get it to fit back inside of the case, I had to design this cute little spacer. And while I was working on that, I also made a replacement clip for the front panel. During the initial disassembly, one of them broke off, and without it, the front panel wasn't staying in place the way it should. So I carefully filed away what was left of the old one, laid out a bit of CA glue, and then stuck a freshly printed clip in its place. After cleaning up any excess glue, I was finally ready to install the post and see if my combination of new parts restored the iMac's structural integrity. And as you can see, I was not gentle in my testing. Oh, that's much better feeling. So now that we've got this case all reassembled and locked together, I think the next thing that we should do is check out the hardware that's gonna be the brains of this operation. This is an M4 Mac Mini, and I could think of nothing more fitting for this project than the latest generation of Apple's M processors. Annoyingly, during the production of this video, Apple announced their new M5 chips, so technically that isn't true anymore, but you get what I was going for. As a PC guy, I gotta give it to Apple. They did a really good job with these M chips. They're efficient, compact, and at only $599 for the base Mac Mini, they deliver an absolute ton of value in terms of computational power per dollar. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for storage, but don't worry, like I alluded to earlier, I've actually got a few different solutions for that particular problem. I think it'll go a little something like that. Yeah, there we go, that looks great. Video over, and I will see you guys in the next one. Or, okay, maybe not. I think slapping the Mac Mini in there like that probably creates more problems than it really solves. We've got no way to power it, we have no way to access all of its ports, we still don't have a screen, we don't have speakers, it still only has a paltry 256 gigabytes of storage, and for a computer that's supposed to be at least semi-mobile, I'm not sure I love the idea of it just floating in there loose. I decided to start with the easiest one and design a simple mount to secure the Mac Mini in place. Thankfully, the Mac Mini is ridiculously simple in terms of its exterior shape, so this didn't take long at all. Using my 3D scans from earlier, I set up the mount so that it would utilize some of the original mounting points on the iMac steel midframe. And of course, I paid careful attention to not block any of its cooling vents. It is pretty simple, but our Mac Mini is now secured inside of the iMac. I'm sure we'll probably tweak this design as we keep going, but for now, the next thing that I want to tackle is how exactly we're going to power the Mac Mini, and also all of the other accessories that we're eventually going to jam in here. And this is a problem that was a fair bit more complicated, and again, also kind of dangerous. Like I said earlier, I wanted to reuse the original power plug. So the first thing I did was a bit of probing to make sure that that plug was passing through straight 120 volt AC power. Once I confirmed that, I realized that because the Mac Mini's power cable is so simple, the conversion of AC to DC power must be happening inside of the Mac Mini. So all we had to do is connect these two wires to the live and neutral lines on the back of the plug. And because of the way AC to DC transformation works, it doesn't even really matter which wires I pair together. But like I said a second ago, we've got other things to power as well. So my grand plan is to build a modular power system. I started with this simple plate and then screwed two junction terminals to it that I'm pretty sure are designed for automotive applications. And that's gonna be a bit of a theme going forward, because I also had to extend the power plug's wires to reach the new terminals. And here I use these really cool inline connectors that I got for working on my car. They might look like normal inline crimp connectors with a heat shrink wrapper, but these guys are hiding a ring of low temperature solder. So as you're shrinking the exterior casing, the solder melts and creates a super strong and super conductive bond. Over on the opposite side, I used a more traditional crimp-on style eyelet. These are perfectly sized for our junction terminals, and they're also heat shrink. So after giving the Mac Mini's power cable the same treatment, I was ready to wire everything up inside the case. But many of you at home are probably rightly very concerned with my exposed junction terminals. These would be super easy to accidentally short, and that's why I made this cover that protects all the conductive bits. It'll serve as a reminder that there's a real electrical risk here whenever the iMac is plugged in. So now that we have our modular power point all set up and ready to go for all our future accessories, I think we are ready to move on to the next thing I want to tackle, which is sound. When the iMac first came out, having a set of high quality speakers integrated right into your computer was almost unheard of. So I knew for our modern iMac, we needed a set of high quality modern speakers. Here we have a set of 1.5 inch full range drivers from Dayton Audio. And that full range bit, that's very important. These speakers can play the whole sonic spectrum, and when you're shopping for speakers that are this small, it's very easy to accidentally buy tweeters. These new speakers are about 50% larger and approximately 3 times more powerful. powerful. So step one was soldering some new leads onto them, and here I used my 3D printable solder extraction fan to keep me safe from all the nasty fumes. If you want to print your own at home, you can scan the QR code on screen right now or check out the link down in the video description. Next, I had to do a bit of online sleuthing. See, you can't just slap speakers into any randomly sized box. To get their best sound, you need to know their optimal enclosure volume. I found that buried deep on the manufacturer's website, and then I used my 3D scans from earlier to create two sonically optimal boxes that would bolt right to the iMac's midframe. I had to make some minor modifications in order to get them to fit, but after they were done printing, I screwed the drivers in place and then held my breath as I test fit them to the midframe and then into the iMac shell for the very first time. Oh man, those new speakers look so good. But we still have a pretty obvious problem. We can get an audio signal out of the front of the Mac Mini with the little headphone jack there, but that signal is not nearly strong enough to power our new speakers. So we're gonna need to boost it with one of these. This is a 200-watt digital amplifier, and my plan is to take that headphone jack signal, run it through the amp where it will then be boosted to be hundreds of times stronger, and then feed it into both speakers. Now that level of amplification will require an external power source, so that's where this DC transformer comes in. On the input side, I gave it the same treatment as the power cable. I removed the original plug and attached connectors that will allow us to bolt it right to the modular power point. And then on the output side, I didn't have to do much except shorten the cable to reduce clutter inside of the case. I made a bracket to secure it to the bottom of the midframe, and then I made a mounting plate for the amp itself. This one I carefully positioned so that the controls of the amp would still be accessible through the quick access panel on the back of the iMac. Now don't worry, I'll show you just how good this new system sounds later, but for now, I want to talk about how we can keep Tim Apple from picking your pockets. Everybody knows that Apple charges an absolutely ludicrous amount of money to increase the storage on basically all of their products. So I want to explore 3 different ways that you can avoid the Apple tax, and by the time we're done, we are going to cram an absolute ton of storage into this thing. This first option is for all of you purists out there. It's just a straight NVMe SSD upgrade. Someone probably got fired at Apple for this, but the Mac Mini storage isn't soldered in place. It's still a specialized format, so you can't just use a normal drive, but a number of third-party companies are now selling replacements, and one of these can save you hundreds of dollars. However, there are still a number of roadblocks. The first one is that you have to disassemble your Mac Mini, and like all Apple products, they don't make it easy. You know what I'll never understand about Apple is they spend so much time making it so hard to disassemble their computers, but then when you do eventually disassemble them, they look so cool on the inside. Like they spend a lot of time making the inside of them, which apparently they don't want anybody to ever actually see, look really cool. Anyways, once you're inside, installation is as easy as undoing a single screw and then swapping in the new drive. But after you've reassembled everything, you still aren't done. For the next step, you'll need another Apple computer. Thankfully, I was able to borrow one, but here you'll use the second Mac to restore the first one by entering into a special DFU mode. And this part was really annoying for me. In their online instructions, Apple specifically tells you not to use a Thunderbolt cable. However, this restore process failed on me 3 separate times, and the only way I was eventually able to get it to work was by using a Thunderbolt cable. All in, this took me a few hours, but eventually I was back up and running with 4 times as much storage. Now, if that sounds like too much of a pain in the ass for you, I've got a much simpler option. This is UGREEN's Mac Mini Hub, and they're actually the sponsor of today's video, but they didn't hire me to promote this product. I just saw it and thought that it looked perfect. Basically, this thing plugs into your Mac and gives you way more ports and I/O options. But in addition to that, on its underside, it's also got a full-sized NVMe drive slot. So in about 15 seconds, I added another 2 terabytes of storage. And this option was even cheaper than the first because it isn't a special proprietary format. Now, if 2 NVMe drives doesn't sound like enough storage to you, well, then you're probably going to be very interested to hear about my third solution, which also happens to be from UGREEN. This is their new DH2300, and it's part of their awesome new lineup of NAS solutions. You can basically think of this thing as your own personal cloud, except it's way cheaper and also way more secure. With 2 easy-to-use slots for mechanical hard drives, you can store up to 60 terabytes of data locally in your own home without paying any annoying monthly monthly fees. UGREEN NASs are incredibly user-friendly. This one took me less than 10 minutes to set up, and you can share that storage with friends, family, and even team members regardless of the type of device they're using. Because this NAS isn't just for PC users. UGREEN built it with Mac users in mind too. You can back up your iPhone photos automatically to it, and it fully supports Time Machine for your MacBooks, iMacs, and of course, your Mac Minis. Plus, it's way faster than any cloud service. With a full gigabyte LAN port, you'll be shuffling large files around in seconds instead of minutes or hours. You can sync your phone to it using NFC pairing, and for all of your mission critical work, it even supports RAID 1. Seriously, when it comes to bulk data storage and backup, the DH2300 is a great all-in-one solution. And if you act quickly, UGREEN is currently having a massive Black Friday sale where this NAS is 20% off. Just check out the link down in the video description, and I'll also include a link for the Mac Mini Hub as well. All right, so I think that's it for storage. Now, let's talk about the screen. Obviously, I couldn't just leave the original CRT screen, so I started drawing up a wish list of features for my ideal replacement, and I figured that it should be bright, high resolution, it should use some sort of modern display technology like IPS or potentially even OLED, and importantly, it needs to fit the dimensions of the iMac's case, including its retro 4:3 aspect ratio. And as you probably already guessed, by the time I got to the end of my list, it was dawning on me that finding the ideal replacement wasn't gonna be easy. But after many hours of trolling online listings, I think I may have found the perfect candidate. Oh, that one might actually work. Well, almost perfect. This is my new portable OLED monitor. It's 14 inches corner to corner, it's 4K, it's 350 nits, and it's a 16:10 screen, which isn't quite 4:3, but I still think it might just work. Now, anyone who's old enough to remember CRTs knows that they're curved, and that means that so is the front of the iMac's case. Laying our new screen down on top of it reveals a pretty obvious problem. That's a lot of daylight between the two shapes. So to fix that, I added the screen to our 3D model and started designing what I'm going to call the interposer. This frame will sit between our new screen and the old case to fill in those gaps. And you know what? My first test print actually fit pretty well. To follow it up, I printed 2 brackets that secure the screen to the interposer and keep it from moving around. With those 3 new pieces, our new screen now fits perfectly in the opening left by the old CRT. You still have bezels on the top and the bottom, but the total usable screen area is now significantly larger. Oh man, look at that. That actually looks really good. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a few rough edges that I want to smooth over here, and one in particular I suspect is bugging a lot of you guys at home right now. Up until this point, I've really just been using filaments that I have left over from other projects, and as a result, the color scheme of our iMac here has really been suffering. So I wanted to find something that was a bit of a better match, but that's actually really hard to do unless you have one of these. 3D printing filaments come in a near infinite number of colors, but trying to match online listings to real-world colors is a fool's errand. That's why I got these color swatches from a few different filament manufacturers, and now, using this one from Bamboo, we can see that their transparent PETG is a pretty damn good match for Apple's clear plastic. So of course, I ordered a roll of it, along with some glass fiber reinforced ABS, and started reprinting all of my parts. Some of these have subtle design tweaks to make them even better, but as you can imagine, reprinting everything was gonna take a good bit of time. So I busied myself with the mystery of how we're going to power this new screen. Included with the screen was this USB power adapter, which is truthfully just another DC transformer. So I cracked it open and started rewiring it for our modular power point. Getting inside was a little bit tricky, but once I was in, all I had to do was solder some longer leads onto the 2 main contacts. And then I repeated the same crimp-on dance you've seen me do a couple of times now. So in the interest of not wasting anybody's time, we'll just skip right to the part where I printed a new cap to seal it all up, and at that point it was ready to be installed inside of the case. But before I could get to it, my new transparent interposer had just finished printing. And here, I took things nice and slow to avoid making a costly mistake. You guys know that I'm a big fan of using CA glue for bonding 3D printed plastics, and normally I'll use an accelerator spray to flash off the glue and have it cure instantly. But when you do that, the glue expands rapidly and gets all foamy, which you'd definitely be able to see through the clear plastic. So instead, I'm letting it cure on its own, which takes at least 8 hours, but should keep everything looking nice and clear. And in the meantime, I still had a ton to do because a lot of the ABS GF parts had just finished printing. When it comes to finished parts, especially in computers, this is my new de facto material. It's super tough, heat resistant, it's got a really nice matte texture, and it prints beautifully on all of my printers. So I got all the parts installed, including a new mount for our screen's power supply, and then I went to check out our new speaker enclosures. I figured that since the originals were clear, I should probably get as close to that as I could. And because these are supposed to be sealed enclosures, after I installed the drivers, I sealed the little wire holes on their backside with some clear silicone. And as you've probably already guessed, the addition of the UGREEN hub necessitated a complete redesign of the Mac Mini mount. This new mount is easier to install, it's modular so that I can easily remove the Mac Mini if I ever need to work on it, and the ports are way more accessible now too. So after doing all of that stuff, I was finally ready to install the screen onto the interposer using our mounting cleats and then test fit it inside of the case. And if this works, it's gonna be a big milestone for the project. Oh, look at that. That looks so much nicer than it has any right to look. But just because we have all of the parts assembled inside of the case doesn't mean we're done just yet, because we still have two major problems that we have to overcome. The first one is that we have no way to access the power switch on the Mac Mini, but I think there's actually a way that we can utilize the original power switch down here with just a little bit of modding. Before I could know for sure if my plan would work, first I had to figure out how the old switch worked. And this was just a matter of pressing the power switch while simultaneously monitoring the wires that came out of the back of it. There we go. When I saw that pressing the switch closed a circuit between two of the wires, I knew that we were on the right track. Because earlier, when we tore down the Mac Mini, I saw that its power switch only had 2 contacts, which means that it almost certainly works in exactly the same way. Except this switch is way smaller. So to work on it, I broke out my trusty digital microscope, which made soldering on 2 extension wires a lot easier. After a quick check for shorts, I fed the wires out through the bottom of the case and then connected them to the original switch using this nifty little Wago connector. A quick test revealed that it worked. But remember earlier how that screen bezel broke apart during disassembly? Well, part of that bezel linked the power button on the front of the case and our switch that we just modified. So the last piece of the puzzle was a little extension for that button that allows it to directly actuate that switch now that the bezel isn't there. And now that that's done, we can easily turn on and off our modern iMac. So that brings us nicely to the final problem with our modern iMac. And it's just that there's no way to access all of the ports on the Mac Mini. So what I'd actually like to do is take a little bit of inspiration from the original machine and make an I/O plate a little something like this. Using the original as a template, I was able to quickly mock up this replacement that features an updated range of modern ports. With 2 C-shaped brackets, I locked it into the original opening, and then using a series of short cable extensions, I wired in a Thunderbolt port, a USB-C port, 2 USB-A ports, and of course, a wired Ethernet port. All of these extensions connected back to the Mac Mini, and while I was there, I also connected both of the cables for our new screen. And with that, our modern iMac was finally ready to be put together and then put through its paces. We're gonna test all of our mods, see what it's like to daily drive this thing, and also do a bit of gaming. Well, first off, I have to say that this thing is an absolute joy. Every time I use it, I'm immediately transported back to the early 2000s, but without all the bad stuff. I've got a bright OLED screen, I have a super snappy processor, I have a sound system that would put a lot of Bluetooth speakers to shame, and I've got the latest Mac peripherals, which I'm slowly warming up to. I even managed to get Chromag Rally running on this thing, which is definitely a nostalgia trip. And surprisingly, I also managed to get a few modern games like Cyberpunk 2077 running on it too. I honestly never thought I'd live to see the day when Cyberpunk was running on an iMac of all things. Overall, I have been very pleasantly surprised with just how powerful the M4 chip is. Even editing 6K video has been a breeze. And part of that is due to the increased speed of our new drives. The internal drive is up to 50% faster in some tests, and while the external drive in the UGREEN hub isn't quite as fast, it's still delivering nearly 1 gigabyte per second of both write and read speeds, which is awesome when you consider just how much cheaper both of these options are compared to paying the Apple tax. Now, balancing the speakers took a few minutes at first. I had to adjust some of the knobs over in the quick access panel, but now that I have, you can control the speakers through software as if they were integrated into the machine from the factory. The I/O is also easy and convenient to access thanks to our little panel, and remember, the first port is a Thunderbolt port, so there are plenty of options to expand your I/O with a dock or something similar. So finally, what's the role for a device like this one in 2025? You could argue that a MacBook is a more practical solution. Sure, the screen would be a little bit worse and it'd probably cost you nearly 3 times as much to get a comparable amount of storage, but it would be a lot smaller and a lot more portable. But that's like saying there's no point in owning a classic car in 2025. What you're trading in terms of practicality, you're making up for in both fun and nostalgia. And truly, that is the point of this project. And speaking of fun, channel members are in for a fun postmortem on this project because I definitely have a lot of thoughts about how I could have made the modern iMac here even better. So check that out if you're interested, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.